Good afternoon. The December the 4th meeting of the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust will be in order. First item on the agenda is the minutes of the November 20th meeting.
Move approval.
Second. Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Are there comments or questions? Hearing none, voting please. Minutes are approved. Next item is the consent docket.
Move approval subject to individual consideration.
Have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Are there matters that need to be discussed separately? Hearing none, voting please. Consent docket is approved. Next item is item 4, the concurrence docket.
I'll move the concurrence docket.
Second. Have a motion and a second on the concurrence docket. Are either of the two matters there matters we need to discuss separately? Hearing no comment, voting please. Concurrence docket's approved. Next item is item 5, items for individual consideration. The first item is item 5A, and we have a slight change to it, and I think the document has been passed out to everybody on the trust.
We do, Mr. Chairman. Pardon me. Your memo remains the same. There are some CENTS changes within the change order document that did not impact the totals. The totals were correct. These were typographical errors, and they were very de minimis had they been carried through the process. But so we've created a revised, again, minorly changed document for your approval.
Move approval. Mr. Chairman, would it be appropriate to get sort of a brief rundown on a history of this? If I knew it at one time, I've forgotten it since then.
At one of our previous meetings in October, we had an item on the agenda wherein we were working on the South Canadian relief line, and we ran into some problems with utility crossings, and we talked about terminating the existing contract and closing it out, and we had approved plan specifications for completion of the contract, which is also on today's agenda. And what you did is you passed a resolution directing the general manager and legal counsel to work with the contractor to resolve and close out the contract. I worked with staff, and we negotiated the change order and compromise, and got the contractor to reduce down many of their charges and claims, and came out with a document that we think is fair and reasonable to both parties.
Okay. How does this total cost compare with our original estimated cost?
The total cost of the two projects put together, the original plus the backup project that we're doing to complete the work, will be more. It will be at least $100,000 more.
Second.
Does this require a motion to amend?
Yes, it does.
I think the first motion would be in order to amend item 5A to conform to the information that's on the.
I'll amend my motion to that effect. Second.
The motion and a second to amend item 5A as we previously stated. Voting please. It's amended. Now we need a motion on the amended.
Move approval.
Item.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve item 5A. Are there further questions or comments? Hearing none. 5A is approved.
Corey, are there issues that are going to need to be taken to the pre-qual board regarding Red Cliff?
The staff is looking at the issues and the performance of Red Cliff. There are many other contributing circumstances that were involved there. And normally our practice has been that where we find multiple responsibilities, that we evaluate them carefully, and we do not take all of them to pre-qual board, because once we find a way to settlement and resolution of the issues, we deem them in good faith.
So after we've settled, it would be bad faith for us to take it to the pre-qual board?
That's our position.
That's fine.
Yes.
Next item is item 5B. It's a presentation on water conservation programming services. So, there we go.
We are. Mr. Chairman, with us today is Dr. Justin Moss from the OSU Extension Service. He'll be our lead. If you approve this project, he'll be our lead scientist. Brett Weingart has a brief presentation for you about the scope of the work proposed.
Mr. Chairman and trustees, if you go to the second slide, please, Debbie. Most of the issues with conservation in our area would be focused on what we call discretionary uses, which normally goes into the area of outdoor irrigation. And indoor water use has been through plumbing code changes and equipment changes like washers and things have reduced them already. So the focus of our conservation would be on areas that we have an opportunity to affect change. And the first of those would be ongoing educational programs and working on demonstration landscapes. These have been used in many cities. Edmond has one as an example where they call them xeriscape demonstration gardens, but what that really means is that they are low water use demonstrations of how you plant plants, how you select plants, how you use proper new types of irrigation technologies to reduce the amount of water use and still have a lush, good-looking curb appeal in your yard. The next is an ongoing public service campaign so that generally everyone in the community can understand that water is important, water is scarce and limited, and you need to take actions to minimize your use of water when you're doing the things you normally do with water. We found that, if you go to the next slide, that these outreach activities and assessments that you would do on an ongoing basis through surveys and such with the public to gauge their understanding of conservation, we got to find out where they are first, use the proper terminology so that they can grasp these concepts and learn about, that process and target these messages in that way. And OSU is the recognized expert in this area. I'll go into that a little bit more and further in. But we're also going to look at ways to reuse water. We are a large reused water provider. We have 2 energy companies using our water for cooling water, and we have an irrigation contract for that. But there's still a reluctance generally in the public to reuse water from treated wastewater and what effects it could have. And OSU Extension Service and the Horticulture Department can help us overcome those barriers with the people that would possibly consider using that as a diversion of that, using that water in lieu of drinking water extends our existing supplies for drinking water. And the more we can take larger landscapes, larger areas that need to be irrigated and get them to use those, it extends the supply and our treated water system's ability to meet the needs for growth. Next slide. Educational programs for customers. Because there are many different groups that we will want to inform and get them to come on board and support a conservation program, we need to have different tactics in our messaging and our educational activities. We'll, of course, focus on residential customers as the largest group of users. About half of our revenues comes from that group and the water they use. When we did our meter replacement program, we found that about 50% of our actual sales of water came from commercial industrial customers. So we need a targeted program to focus on commercial and managed property company personnel. And we need a program focused on park, golf course, sports field operators. I'm sure you've noticed water running down the gutter in the morning on the way to work, not doing anyone any good. And we need a program to help those folks understand. And if we go in and talk to the person at the local business, a lot of times they don't have anything to do with it. They have a firm doing that for them. And so we need to get a hold of the people that are actually installing and maintaining and setting the irrigation systems so that they can better do that. And OSU already has programming where these folks have to go through annual programming and learn new things. And so they can integrate these new activities and trainings into their ongoing programs of certifications with these groups to instill these new habits and behaviors with them. Next slide. Hands-on training, one of the things that you find is that you don't have to compromise in what your yard looks like when you use water conservation techniques and strategies. And if you could get people engaged through hands-on training, that's the best way to get them to start practicing these techniques. And OSU will, in this proposed program, provide a lot of hands-on training opportunities. Nursery companies and such will become engaged in this and be able to do this too. It's not just the Extension Service, but their outreach activities to get private sector businesses involved in this so that the clients of the local nursery will be able to learn these techniques from the people they normally go to now. The demonstration gardens were, in their materials, they proposed 3 locations, but those are flexible based upon working out the relationship between OSU Extension Service and where these publicly accessible areas can be, but we're proposing 3 of those, being that because we have a very large city, we want them to be where the people can get to them, spread around throughout the community, and so it's more likely that they'll be able to participate. By 621 square miles, we need to have more than one. That's what our view is. Next slide. OSU already has 2 existing television programs, which they'll use those to help spread the messaging. So that results in us not having to spend a lot of money on expensive advertising. They'll do that for us through that process. They'll make available videos on a website, and also we can link to that through our public information office through okc.gov, where people can access those and learn those activities as a part of the program. They'll also use some newspaper spot, television advertising as needed. We'll have local displays in businesses so that people will get into this. Because we haven't had an assertive conservation program prior, the thought is that this is a 3-year ramp up to get to what we would call steady state of a program. So the first 3 years are developmental, but because we need to have an effect now, they're going to focus on, while they're developing the demonstration gardens, they're going to work on activities that can get the messaging out early this spring, through the summer, so that we can get the best bang for the buck and get the impact being felt now while we're in the drought as a part of the process too. Next slide. In the improved use of treated wastewater, we have previously discussed with you that we've looked at some different areas where we could use treated wastewater further. They have some contacts also that they want to work on this to look at water quality parameters, environmental impacts, soil and plant health, things that we don't really have a lot of expertise in the utilities department, but they do. This is their area of expertise, and we think that they can help bring forth the possibility of expanding that market for us. Next slide. We are going to do quarterly assessments of goal achievement. We're going to focus this so that first, are our customers over a period of time learning about conservation? Are we being impactful with our customers? Are they learning the messaging? What are the gaps in their understanding? What do we need to do next? So we can tailor this and adapt the program over time to make sure that we're getting people to be more understanding and, let's say, hold these values, because conservation can mean a different thing depending on where you are. If you're in an area where they have a lot of rain all the time, conservation doesn't mean the same thing as it does in Oklahoma City on our second year of drought, right? And so we want, it's a lot of social values goes into this, and people have different perspectives on that, and we don't want them to feel that they're being preached to, but rather we're being helpful in providing messaging and educational activities that can actually help them take steps that are readily available to them to conserve water in the process. Next slide. When we look at whether we should ramp up an internal program or whether we should partner with an agency that's already recognized in the state as being an expert in this area, it was easy to come to the conclusion that the local OSU Extension Services and the OSU Horticulture Department was a recognized expert. It's viewed as the recognized leader, and this is where the people that work on these activities, that are in the business of installing and maintaining landscapes and such, and people that are interested in plant species go to for expertise, and they have the expertise to assist us in the program. When you look at the document that was attached to the agenda item, that document was entirely put together by them after meeting with Marcia and I and staff about our challenges and our situation, and we provide them information from American Water Works Association and all the resources they have available. And they got it very quickly. And Dr. Moss could probably give you some additional information about that, but we believe it's a lot less costly for us to partner with OSU than it would be for us to develop our own program. And the cost per customer is less than $2.50 per year. As we become more successful, yes, we will see some reduction in water use per capita, but we will also be able to extend the use of our existing assets to serve more customers as that occurs. That's a part of it, but the real issue is that what amount of water do we need per customer to serve our customers today compared to the amount of water we need in the future to serve our customers on an annual basis. And our goal is to try to reduce that amount somewhat over time, in spite of our consumptive society that is focused on expanding and growing new uses for everything we do. This is focused on trying to sustain it at a level that's set and maybe reduce it over time.
As you know, in the last couple of years of extreme hot, dry weather, we've had trouble meeting peak demand. We got to the point where enforcement was required. The troubling part about that is we hadn't done enough on the awareness and advocacy side before moving toward a more aggressive action. Our intention is to make certain we've done everything we can possibly to explain why it might be necessary so that we get some better buy-in. If I can shave 5% off the peak hour, which is about 250 million gallons a day, instantaneous rate, we can be a lot more comfortable in delivering constancy of flow to customers. We are again proceeding with a lot of improvements to help make certain we can get adequate water supplies to our entire customer base at all times. That's the reason for the approach.
Question, Marcia. As we go forward in this program, what kind of measurements are we going to take, capture that would indicate whether our program is successful or not, and or how successful it is?
I like looking at irrigation meters as a pretty direct way. I think it's difficult to get apples to oranges unless we do some adjustments based on weather conditions. Hours of daylight, wind, other evaporation factors, and we'll work at creating that kind of. Other utilities have used a similar measure, so we're out exploring I haven't done
The
it.
second question is, one of the suggestions was made to me one time about a constituent who called, had an extensive fescue yard. He was watering a lot during the wintertime, and the suggestion was maybe he needed to get a separate water meter. How much would that cost an average customer to have an additional meter put in just strictly for the irrigation system?
Depends on the meter size. It could be less than $500 would get you a meter.
And how much would the cost per gallon, roughly be when you can add together both his domestic uses and his irrigation uses? Would that be the same, or slightly more, slightly less?
Our residential customers are, and this time of year that's going on, our residential customers are billed for all the, we measured their winter water use and charge a residential customer that for that much sewage use. Sewer cost is around $3.
$2.55 a 1,000 gallons for the water, and we have a uniform rate. So the rate's the same whether they buy it off an irrigation system or they buy it off their domestic, but their winter period average is where you might get in. But we suppose that we think we solved that problem by picking the 3 specific months earlier when the ordinance was changed on that, but they could use some water.
It'll help. But the fact of the matter is that as warm as it's been, and people's fescue yards are still watering through it. So if you have an irrigation sprinkler alone, you won't be paying the sewer bill on it.
And so
You'll have savings on your sewer bill.
we'll save
The
that.
water cost will be exactly the same, because that's a straight.
Yeah.
So the only savings, if any, would be accrued through the use of the fact that he would get a lower sewage charge because...
Which would be all year round.
Yeah.
Now, so you'd have the cost of installing the meter, then there'd be an additional monthly fee for the second meter, a base fee of...
Of $11. I don't think they'd ever come out ahead by putting in a second meter when you get to looking at it. I think
Well, it
it,
depends on the usage.
yeah, but a typical residential customer,
Not a typical one, but
Yeah.
if you have a large
Yes.
fescue yard, you certainly could.
And we have people who could help with that. If the customer's interested, we can run those calculations for customers.
Thank you.
Happy to do it. As you know, we're looking at whether we're in a long-term drought. The forecasts are for normal weather, a little bit warmer than normal, and normal rainfall, which unfortunately, because we've had 2 years where we've had 10 inches less rain 2 years in a row, means we really want some heavy rain. It could mean that all of the rain for March and April come at one time might be just perfect for us. But we're looking forward, of course, to how long does the drought continue as it has begun to impact water supplies across the state.
Would the availability of a second meter for irrigation purposes in the residential area, would that be the beginning maybe of a treated sewer water line to use for irrigation?
Those meters could be transferred over to treated water irrigation. Should we build the sewer line yet? Should we build the treated wastewater line?
We have a treated wastewater customer. How does that rate compare in terms of water usage? Is it more or less?
They're very favorable.
Okay, thank you.
Is this program contemplated as totally voluntary, totally informational, no?
We seek first to make aware, to develop awareness and advocacy.
We also talked about looking at rates and putting in an inclining block rate, which would be a financial impact that would go along with the awareness proponent of it. We'll do the rates again.
My experience has been that people don't change much because they see the light. It's more often because they feel the heat. And a totally voluntary program may sound nice, but I'd like to see some statistics from some other cities whether it's worked or not. I mean, it's a good idea. I did a little radio deal last Sunday night about it, and you get a lot of good feedback for introducing a conservation policy, and it's all warm and fuzzy, but whether or not you actually impact usage of treated water is a whole nother matter. if you've got some statistics that show that it does work to tell people what a nice thing it would be if they'd quit using treated water to water the yard with, I'd like to see that. Because,
Roughly $500,000.
right. Well, that's part of my point. That's a lot of money.
When we start going down this road I think we believe that it's better to inform the public of the situation and the ways they can start conserving water before we would start instituting new, or an inclined block rate.
Don't misunderstand me. I'm 100% in favor of what we're doing, 100%. It's going to be very difficult to measure it. As Pat's question is a very, very good question, I think, is how are we going to measure it? It's going to be very hard to measure it. I want to see, I think it's important enough that we, if necessary, we put teeth into it, because I think we can't continue to do what we're doing. It's not a sustainable model just to keep on keeping on what we're doing. And we've got to find a way to be a better steward of the resource.
Happy to bring that information back to you.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's a good presentation. Any other comments on that? We probably need a motion to receive the report. Oh, yeah, sponsored, yeah, okay. We need a motion on B2. To spend the money. Right.
443.
Have a motion and a second to approve spending the money. Any comments? Voting, please. Motion is approved. Next item has to do with the executive session. Do we need executive session?
We don't. At this point in time, there are some negotiations that are continuing, and some progress is being made. And we'll get to a milestone. We'll get back to you.
Move to strike the item.
Second.
Motion and a second to strike. Consider the item stricken. The next item is items from trustees. General Manager report.
Mr. Chairman, trustees, I don't have anything on your agenda that's formal, but I wanted to update you on a couple of things. You'll notice that the eastern Oklahoma River Basin has recently had its water level dropped, and that's because a new siphon under the river is beginning construction this week. You should see progress on that very quickly. It has a very short turnaround time so that we get out of the way of spring river events, and we have every expectation that we will. Sam Simandy and Nathan Madenwald, who's our project manager, are here if you have questions about that. We're also scheduling a meeting of the Canton Lake Advisory Committee, which we expect to hold next week.
In anticipation of a potential release.
In anticipation of a potential release, again, looking forward to, as we did last year, finding the wettest possible period to take the water, and mindful of how low Lake Huffner is at this point.
Is that a December, January, February timeframe? I can't remember when we did it last year.
Yes, we'll be looking at, again, depending upon rainfall.
Sure.
Best rainfall chances right now are for late in the month.
Okay.
We are expecting, I'm very superstitious.
No, that's fine. I just couldn't remember if we did it more in the spring or if we did it over the winter, and that's what I was trying to remember.
Typically, we try to hold off as long as we possibly can, hoping for fall rains were non-productive. In the spring, we think we'll need some water to carry us through the spring.
Right.
And then in the spring, we try to wait because those are our heaviest rain months, March, April, May.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other comments? No one signed up, but are there citizens to be heard? Hearing none, we're adjourned.